We have started to record the most recent session of SPCH 1113, Introduction to Public Speaking, for the first summer session. It is a stormy Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. Those of you who are with me live, you know that I was testing the audio and video before we started recording, live from North Carolina with the elimination game for the SAU Mule Riders in the NCAA Division II World Series. So we are live and ready to go. We're going to be starting day one for informative speeches today. Day two will be on Thursday. And then for the last 2 weeks of the term, and I know it's hard to believe, but 2 weeks from today is going to be the last day, or 2 weeks from Thursday will be the last day of the first summer session. It goes by very quickly. And today, out of the total of 19 course sessions, it is number 10. So please make certain that in an online course, it is your responsibility to make certain that everything is done on time. No excuses. There will be some occasions where there are challenges with interactivity or sending something to the wrong email address, but please make sure that you are watching all of these course videos. We go into great detail at length over and over again about what's required of you and certain types of projects that you can look at for research and performance purposes. So before we go any further, let's go to the student preview mode on Blackboard, reminding you of what is coming up this week and how you can access different types of materials that are going to be appropriate for the final 2 weeks and 1 day of this course. I refresh the message daily. For all of you, I think it's helpful to watch videos when your presentations are being shown to get some feedback in real time. It is always going to be positive in nature, and hopefully, as you've seen from the examples that I've shown last week with demonstrative presentations and this week with the informative speeches, that you can learn how to become more confident in front of the camera and more smooth with your delivery using the text, the visuals, to stimulate your abilities to be both extemporaneous and conversational, because if you are extemporaneous, the extemporaneous quality will help you flow with the conversational approach. And then when we get to the My Grades area, probably over the weekend, this is when I will put up the informative speech grade. So before class on Monday, we will have 40 out of the 100 classes decided. If you ever want to join us live, a reminder that on Blackboard Ultra, I have everything now recurring. So at this point, when you click on that button, all of the courses that are remaining for the term are there for you to join from bottom to top. These 4 sessions are the final week when we examine wildcard speeches. These 4 are next week when we are looking at persuasive presentations. Here we've got tomorrow's class session, the 9th, and today, the 8th, which is already in progress. We also have the recordings. Everything that we have done so far is right there. So session 10, which will be informative speech, day 1, is going to be right here, always cascading intentionally in reverse chronological order. And I'll leave that on the screen for the time being because we have a number of informative speeches on a variety of unique topics that will be presented today. And with that, we will go to the course syllabus area and examine the course itinerary at the end of class, but right now, the course speech schedule. This is the way that everything is going to be set up for the next couple of days. The speeches that we are going to show you today from the listing that I have so far, and keep in mind if you're with us live, you have until the end of class to send me your material, but I have up and ready to go Scott going first on the history and evolution of rock and roll, Bracelin with the different types of birth control, Ariana is giving her informative presentation on the subject of depression. And we have someone new. We have Elizabeth, who is giving her presentation on ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And we also have the demonstrative speech from Elizabeth. She had a connectivity issue, and I think it's fair that her presentation be played for the record. So at the end of class, we will get in her demonstrative presentation on YouTube, which deals with the subject of clogging. We will get away from the student preview mode and transition into our speeches. So again, 2 weeks from today, we are already completed with the first summer session. Always double check to make certain that in your emails that the proper link for either Loom or YouTube has been prepared. Our first of 5 speeches for the day is Scott. The history and evolution of rock and roll. As many of you know, one of the things that I like to do in here is to take your presentations once they're completed, mute the audio, and go in reverse order, taking a look at your visuals, taking a look at your eye contact. Are you improving with your webcam? Are you improving with all of the elements that are on the checklist for content, delivery, and visuals? Our first informative speech of the day from Scott Graves, The History and Evolution of Rock and Roll. And I should indicate that the only thing that I do before class is to get these ready. I never watch them before class because I want my reactions to be honest, to be spontaneous. And I know many of you realize that on YouTube, some of the most popular YouTube channels are reaction channels, oftentimes for music, other venues, and that's basically what I'm doing here to a more formalized extent. So for all of you, always keep in mind that you can be your best judge of how you are improving because you watch these over and over again, and the best version of any of these 4 graded presentations are going to be sent to me. We begin with the history and evolution of rock and roll from Scott, and here we go.
Hello, my name is Scott Graves, and today I'm going to be telling you about the history and evolution of rock and roll. Now, to understand the history of rock and roll, you have to understand first what rock and roll is. Rock and roll is generally classified as the sound of a guitar boosted by an electric amp and supported by one, if not multiple basses, and backed by a full set of drums. Now, this is not an absolute hard definition. However, it is considered the best general definition for rock and roll. Now, to understand the origins of rock and roll, you have to understand that the end of the Second World War hit the entire world very hard. One of the only good things to come out of the end of the Second World War is the radio, which had previously only been used in military endeavors, began use for civilians. This caused the radio to quickly become the center of the home, and it was not unusual in the late 40s and throughout the 50s to see the entire family gathered up at night around the radio. The central family radio allowed for new forms of entertainment, such as talk shows and early forms of podcasts, and most importantly to this discussion, rock and roll. Now, rock and roll started out as rhythm and blues. At the time, it was called race music. Now, rhythm and blues was mixed with country music, and you get the earliest forms of rock and roll we have. Now, generally, it's considered that the first time rhythm and blues was played for a live audience over air was in Cleveland, Ohio, by a man named Alan Freed, who was a disc jockey at the local radio station, who first coined the term rock and roll and played it on air. Now, as rock and roll gained its popularity throughout the 50s, legends started to arrive on the scene, 2 of which most popular are Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley. They were known as the father of rock and roll and the king of rock and roll, and it was quoted as saying they were not the men who created it, but they redefined it and adjusted the attitude of the entire profession. Now, after the 50s took place and all these legends arrived, the UK was also getting its new introduction to rock and roll. This caused the rise of several bands such as the Beatles, most popular, and the Rolling Stones, a very close second. These bands in the UK gained so much popularity that it's caused what's known as the British invasion. Now, this is when all of these British bands came over with their version of rock music into America and throughout the world, causing an increase of international popularity that the genre had not had before, just being isolated to an American audience. Meanwhile, in America, there were several new forms of rock and roll being used while the British were invading. This is generally the rise of garage rock, which was a raw, aggressive form of rock that the world was not quite accustomed to, that, as the name implies, sounds like it was practiced in a garage. Now, the new blues rock was almost the exact opposite of the British rock that was being brought over. British rock was generally used higher tempo and more upbeat paces, while blues rock was almost the exact opposite. And lastly, in the Southeast and the South in general, there was what's known as Southern rock, with such noticeable bands as Lynyrd Skynyrd and ZZ Top performing all throughout the 60s. There were several other new styles that took root in the 60s that were not quite as up there as the previous ones. However, there was a new classification for rock music that came through at the time: soft rock, which was their general softer played rocks like psychedelic and folk rock; hard rock, which is self-explanatory, it was harder than other ones; and the early versions of heavy metal, which was hard rock but played with more intensity and volume. Now, as the 60s wound to a halt, the 70s and 80s came in, which is known for many as the golden age of rock and roll. The 70s and 80s gave rise to popular bands like Queen, Kansas, Aerosmith, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, one of the most popular rock bands of all time, Kiss. Now, during this time, there were also new types of rock being brought out onto the scene, such as punk rock and heavy metal. These new types of rock would later pave the way for the rest of the 80s, the late 80s and the 90s. Now, in the 90s, rock saw a slight decline in its popularity because of the new kid on the block, rap, which quickly took the scene and started topping the charts. Now, despite the fact that rap came onto the scene and was stealing the spotlight, there existed a new form of rock in the 90s that got people interested in it again: grunge rock. Noticeable for this is Nickelback and a few others that don't come to mind at the moment. But you had some that if you couldn't beat them, join them. The pop epidemic that came in the late 80s and the 90s was crazy. So people decided mix pop and rock. This new pop rock was generally more widely accepted in the 90s than other forms of rock that were heavier or more metal. The new alternative, indie rock. In the 70s and 80s, indie rock and alternative rock were generally classified as the same thing. Now, the new kid on the scene, rap, decided to mix with rock to make alternative metal or rap rock. And the 90s and the 2000s especially came with the garage rock revival, where more bands in the 2000s especially came through with the rocking in the garage style. Unfortunately, nothing is built to last. In the end of the 2000s, especially in the 2010s, rock music saw a steady decline in its popularity, and the overall downfall of rock music was the absence of money. They hadn't made any new chart toppers in years, and it didn't look like any was going to come through. And throughout the 2010s, all the way up to 2020, rock took a back seat to other things like rap, hip hop, and pop. That concludes my speech over the history and evolution of rock and roll, and I would like to thank you for listening.
Notice what Scott does at the end. His total time on the bottom of the screen is 7:51. He wraps up his speech, pauses until the end of the recording. And he does something which is smart. If you're going to take your webcam and place it in the bottom left-hand portion of the screen, then whether it be there or someplace else, probably a good idea to locate the timer right next to it so you're not searching back and forth with eye contact. Now, Scott, I would say this. It might be a good idea for you to experiment with your final two presentations on putting your webcam in the upper right-hand portion of the screen. There were a couple of occasions where there was text being obscured by the webcam. Remember, I told all of you guys yesterday when we were watching videos, if we're looking at a slide template like this, take off the thank you, take off the timer, take off his webcam on the bottom of the screen. If you're using this template with black and white, what probably is going to work best with your webcam placement? Where is your text going to be located? Usually on the left-hand side of the screen if you're going left flush. Even if you're doing a centered version of your headlines, oftentimes it is not going to reach this corner of the screen. And even if it did, you could take a font style this large and make it slightly smaller, put it flush left right over here, so it's not going to interfere with any of your text. This is a small point. It's not going to have any bearing on your grade. My feeling is that the demonstrative and informative speeches are setting you up for more success with persuasive and wild card because the level of your improvement is going to be quite obvious, as his delivery was. Much smoother, much more confident, and he did a nice job with his demonstrative speech. But he comes across more fluent. There are some occasions where he says now, which, as you realize from previous classes, I will classify as a verbal vocalic. I would rather have you say that than so it's okay. I only heard one regarding the overall smoothness. I think he did quite a good job. Let's go ahead and mute the audio, go from back to front, and here he's talking about the steady decline. Now keep in mind that when I first came to Magnolia, there was such a thing as live disc jockeys on radio stations, but as we move on to more technologically based times, you're getting more material coming in from the satellite or from the internet, and especially whenever we're listening, and he was talking about some of the genres in the last portion of his speech. A lot of the musical genres in 2022 have blended together. When you're listening to a lot of rock, especially on Magnolia radio stations, it sounds a little bit different. And so does country, or I should say in the Arklatex with rock. Magnolia is primarily country. The radio stations in this part of the country, when we listen to country, there does seem to be somewhat of a soft rock influence. And not only are we looking at radio stations, but we're looking at streaming services, we're looking at iHeartRadio, we are looking at Spotify, we're looking at different types of podcasts. So the way in which we are disseminating, recording, and listening to music has changed. And the artists have to keep up with that. So that's why, in this case, an historical perspective from Scott's case is appropriate. That's the fall, the 90s and 2000s. And again, we can't minimize the importance of downloading to the industry or even sampling. This is an example of what I'm talking about right here, Scott, where some of the text is being obscured. Now, For demonstrating and for informing, this is not going to have any real bearing on your grade, but just experiment. Where on most of your slides is there going to be a dead spot? And he's got all of his bullet points to help remain extemporaneous. Moving back, his eye contact is relatively in the same place during most of the presentation, so you can tell that he practiced looking in the direction of the camera as much as possible. No real breaks in thought. And you'll see that with all of us. I'm catching myself, especially today, with not necessarily that, but we don't necessarily have totally smooth deliveries all the time. But when you're going back and watching any of your takes, you can always select which one of the 4 or 5 recordings is most appropriate in terms of time management, topic selection, different types of visuals. And speaking of visuals, he's included that right here for the golden age of rock and roll, talking about some of the groups that are popular in these bullet points on top. You're primarily with Queen, Kansas, Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen came into prominence in the 1970s. Most of those groups did, and many of them live on to this day, either with different types of covers from other artists, or some of them will still go on tour. Maybe not with the original bandmates, but it's still interesting to see how they're making a living decades later. Then you see how punk rock, alternative, and the new heavy metal formats came into play, especially in the late 70s or early 1980s. Continuing to move back, the new styles taking root. And whenever we're looking at folk rock, that's basically in the early to mid 60s, some of the other formats. Now, again, this is where I can't see it. I'm guessing that's Christian rock. Not sure what that is right there. If you want to move your webcam over here, then as I indicated a moment ago, you take this particular font style, make it a little bit smaller. So if you put your webcam up here, it's not going to be obscured. Or consider the right bottom corner. As we are roughly at the 3.5-minute mark, meanwhile in America, we're looking at garage rock, blues rock, southern rock. Garage rock was probably more prominent in the 1960s. Leonard Skinner, ZZ Top, really good examples. And then you've got the iconic cover to one of the Beatles albums. I think that's Abbey Road, UK, in the early to mid 1960s. And it really is not only the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the British Invasion, a lot of groups, the Hollies, the Dave Clark 5, international popularity soars because of the Beatles. Then we move back to the origins of rock with rhythm and blues. And it's important that he indicates race music on here. In some of my introductory mass media, mass communication courses, we have actually played white artist covers of race music. Many radio stations in the South would not necessarily play music from African American artists, but they would be covered by white artists. If you ever go back on YouTube and see the original Tutti Frutti from Little Richard, and then you see the cover of it from someone like Pat Boone, it's totally night and day. You've got the version with Little Richard, and then you've got the vanilla version played on a number of white stations in the South from Pat Boone. I'm glad you mentioned Alan Freed. The first name is misspelled. It is A-L-A-N. Alan Freed coined the term rock and roll. A lot of people were using the term rock, but usually the person who is most prominent is going to get credit for it, and that's what Alan Freed had with the coining of the term, because disc jockeys were very influential. And then we move back to what an old radio set looked like in the day. That would be an old AM radio station becoming the center of the home. Radio as we know it today is totally different, where you can literally program your own format online. Some of the characteristics of rock, I thought he did a good job there with rock with the amplified electric guitar supported by a bass and the drums. And depending upon what genre you're listening to, there can be variations on the theme where one instrument is going to be is going to be favored by another depending upon who the lead singer is or who the head of the group is. Still, the eye contact as we're in the first 5 seconds of the speech is relatively consistent. So having an historically based presentation makes perfect sense in a course like this. And if he had wanted to, and you don't have to, Scott could have incorporated a couple of video clips from YouTube into his presentation onto a slide. But it really is up to you, what you feel most comfortable with. But if any of you want to experiment near the end of the semester with any type of interactivity for the persuasive or wild card speeches, it certainly is appropriate for you to do so. It's acceptable. But if you don't want to, that's certainly all right as well. When Scott sends me his material, this is what we find. And many of you will send me little messages with the email attachments to Loom. And Scott said he was trying to clean up the webcam, and I thought, for the most part, Scott, you did a very good job. Be aware that whenever you want to say now in between points, just pause, because if you pause and say nothing, the time span really is not all that long. But I thought, in terms of overall improvement from the 3 major categories on the speech evaluation checklist, you're moving along quite nicely. And like I said with the camera off, occasionally there will be days when there are hesitations in our speech. I'm catching myself in that today. Not every day is going to be perfect, but no matter what, we have to plug away and we move ahead to Bracelin, who is our second presenter of the day. Her presentation is on the different types of birth control. For a lot of the presentations that we saw this week for informative speeches from semesters and earlier years gone by, you'll notice, especially on Loom, that when you're taking a course during a regular semester and you're using the free version of Loom, a lot of speeches that we've seen or will see taken during a semester will have the 5-minute countdown, either from top to bottom or 5 minutes down to 0. But early on, during that 28 or 30-day trial period for Loom, you can speak a little bit longer and you don't have to worry about getting cut off after 5 minutes. In the case of Scott, his presentation was almost 8 minutes. As you can see from Bracelin, hers is about the same length. Ariana's speech coming up is about 7 minutes. And then we've got the 2 presentations from Elizabeth with the time being roughly equal on each, closing in on 5 minutes. So without any further ado, this is our second presentation of the day. This is Bracelin talking about different types of birth control. Now, after we get through these speeches today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. We'll briefly go back to each of our presenters today, put all of the speeches in closed captioning, mute the audio, and play a random 30 to 45 seconds of each speech with my commentary in the background to check on the improvement for all of you in terms of speaking in a complete sentence structure. Our second informative speech of the day, day 1, on different types of birth control. And here we go.
Hello, my name is Bracelin Glover, and I will be giving my informative speech over the different types of birth control. So first and foremost, what is birth control? Birth control is the act of preventing pregnancy. Methods include medications, procedures, devices, and behaviors. Who does birth control target? It mostly targets young females and really anyone who doesn't want kids and have sex, have unprotected sex, they want kids. But birth control can also be for your menstrual cycle. Like if your menstrual cycle is irregular or too heavy, you could get on birth control to lighten it up or just change it. So here are some birth control methods. There's birth control pills, IUD, birth control shots, male condoms, and birth control patches. There are many more types of birth control methods, but I would just be giving a brief explanation of each of these. So, birth control pills. Birth control pills are a daily medication that contains estrogen and progestin, which prevents ovaries from releasing eggs. This requires a prescription, so you cannot go in the store and buy these or any pharmacy. You will have to go to your clinic or to your doctor for them to prescribe them to you. So, how these pills work is, as you can see in the photo, they have the different days. You will go by the days of the week and you will take one a day at a specific time. So you want to make sure that you take them at the same around the same time every day. Otherwise, it can affect your body. Like it can mess your body up, basically. So these pills do not provide protection. So these pills will not stop you from getting any sexually transmitted diseases. They will only stop you from getting pregnant, which is a 91% chance, which they are 91% effective if taken correctly. So if you take them how you're supposed to and stuff like that, they are 91% effective. And some effects that they have are menstrual changes, which could lighten your period up, or like spotting, breast tenderness, nausea, and mood swings. IUD, I think it's intrauterine device. I'm not sure how to say the word, so I think that's why I shortened to IUD. But as you can see in the picture, IUD is a little T-shaped piece of plastic inserted into the uterus that releases only the hormone progestin in the uterus to prevent sperm from fertilizing eggs. So this is placed, and it can only be placed by a healthcare professional. So this little T-shaped plastic thing will be inserted into your vagina, of course, into your uterus, and by a healthcare professional, which will release the progestin while in there. And it can last up to 3 to 6 years, and it is over 99% effective. So this method is really effective. And I'm pretty sure there are no like ways to take care of it. You just leave it in there and like don't try to take it out. Don't try to mess with it on your own. If you have any problems, go to your clinic or to your doctor. And yeah, and then this some effects come with this is menstrual changes, and this one can lighten your period up as well. Like your period won't be as heavy, and it can shorten the days. And yeah. The third method is the birth control shot. The birth control shot is like any regular needle, like any regular needle shot, which will be injected into one of your arms. It will be the same arm each time you inject it, and it is an injector of the hormone progestin. So this is another one with only one hormone, progestin, and it lasts for 3 months. So it's not like you're not gonna be sticking yourself every day. You're going to be sticking yourself once every 3 months, and it can be administered at home or a clinic. So you can either stick yourself or you can go to a clinic and they'll stick you. You cannot buy this in the stores though. You would have to be prescribed to you. So in order for you to get on it, you would have to go to a clinic for it to be prescribed. And it is 94% effective. And some effects that come with the birth control shot is weight gain, headaches, and menstrual changes, which are the same as the other ones, like bleeding, or it could I say light, it could lighten your period, or it could shorten the days of your period. The fourth um, birth control method is a male condom. A male condom is a thin covering worn on the penis during sex. As you can see in the picture, the unrolled condom will be he will put it on his penis, which will which he will be used during sex. It prevents sperm from reaching the egg, and it prevents sexually transmitted infections. This is the only method that prevents sexually transmitted infections. So although you may be on one of the other type of birth control methods, you still can use a condom for the diseases or infections because they will not prevent that. This is the only this is the only method that would prevent infections. And it is only 82% effective. So it's not as effective as the other ones, but it does have a little bit more benefits than the other ones. No prescription is needed. You can go in a store and buy these. You go in a mostly anywhere nowadays and buy condoms. You go to the gas station, the clinic, the anywhere, and get condoms. The last type of birth control method I'll be talking about is the patch. The patch is a thin beige piece of plastic that looks like a square bandage, as you can see in the picture. It may not look effective, but I don't know how it really works, but it is applied to the skin. The patch gives out hormones that prevent ovaries from releasing eggs. So you change it out every week, and the hormones are estrogen and progesterone. So, in my opinion, it really acts like the birth control pills. It is 91% effective, and the effects are spotting. Some effects are spotting, breast tenderness, nausea, mood changes, and menstrual changes. So, in my opinion, it works as like just as good as the pills because the pills use the same, release the same hormones, and give off the same effects around the same effectiveness. And yeah, so that's the rundown on the birth control patch. So it's better to be safe than sorry. If you know you're using unprotected sex and you're not planning a pregnancy, you know you don't want any kids, or you're too young and you're having sex and you don't want to use any, condoms or any protection, then you should definitely use one of these types of birth control. Some of them are different than the other ones. You just have to make sure to do your research thoroughly and see which one best fits you. But if you don't want to get pregnant or you're a teenager and you really like just haven't planned any pregnancy or anything, it's just best to get on one of these types of birth control methods. And I really hope it helped you. Thank
I'd probably give myself a couple of seconds like Scott did, Braceland, at the end of your presentation, so we're not being cut off, because right there you're saying thank you and we're right at the verge of the recording ending. It's really enjoyable as any term goes on, whether it's the fall, the spring, or the summer, to check on overall smoothness, confidence as a speaker, how you appear in terms of overall delivery improvement. Look at what we've seen so far from both Scott and Braceland. Their persona on camera comes across as more authoritative, more in control, more knowledgeable as time goes on. And they did a nice job last week. There are always going to be some rough spots for any novice public speaker, but noticing that improvement, the more that you do it, the better off most of the time you are going to look and sound. Having the symbiotic relationship between text or graphics on the screen that are going to assist in your remaining spontaneous and, in this case, informative throughout. Her persuasive conclusion was obvious in a case like this for the topic, but in any event, whenever we're looking at this slide, for instance, better to be safe than sorry. You've got two different graphics. She's looking at the screen, and for the most part, she is looking in the direction of the camera for most of the presentation. Is your eye contact always going to be full in an online class? No, because you're looking down at your computer monitor. It all depends upon where the webcam is located, because some of them are going to be in a slightly different place, depending upon whether it's a laptop or whether, like in my case, you've taken a webcam and placed it somewhere on your computer monitor. And the other part of this is the location of the webcam. And the one thing I would say, Braceland, is find a place on a slide and leave it there. Don't move it during the speech. As I've indicated for many of you, I will always say it's got no bearing on your grade, but find a location that you feel comfortable with and leave it there, whether it be upper right, lower right, and work your text around it. There's a little bit of obscuring of the exclamation mark, but it's a small point. Let's go ahead and move backward. Eye contact, looking at the camera. In the same way that Scott did, she has tightened up her webcam, headshot. There's the birth control patch, and she's relatively conversational all the way through, where she's got the patch itself and a number of bullet points talking about either the effects, hormones, or how you change it out every week. So that's the birth control patch. And many years ago, when we were in non-interactive classrooms, either for face-to-face or online instruction, you would hear different types of birth control, including something called Depo-Provera. So obviously birth control is changing as the years go by. And some of the mood changes that can be accompanying any type of birth control. There is the male condom that was discussed. Birth control shot, again, notice that her face in relation to the webcam is relatively consistent. In this case, an injection of a hormone progestin, and it lasts for 3 months. Continuing on through this particular graphic with the birth control shot visual to what an IUD is. And if you ever want to just bypass trying to pronounce intrauterine, that's okay. Just saying IUD and explaining it, or taking a look at how the IUDs have progressed over the years, that's certainly appropriate. And she's looking at her graphics on the computer while discussing it. Same thing here with birth control pills with a number of bullet points and the effectiveness. What is birth control? And this is where you can never assume, depending upon the level of sophistication, depending upon age, depending upon where you grew up, what your parents said or didn't say, you may not necessarily, depending upon your circumstances here or around the world, know a lot about birth control. And it's okay to give birth control 101 information for those who may not necessarily know the specifics targeting young females. And there she is, again, looking at the camera. The lighting is set up pretty well. The beginning of her speech, types of birth control. Always keep in mind, now let's look at her title slide, because Scott did the same thing. All of you are going to experiment with your title slides during the semester. So as we indicated with his, take away this part of the graphic, take away this part of the graphic, consider Microsoft PowerPoint, Google Slides, Canva, C-A-N-V-A, or any of the materials that you could incorporate into them, such as Slides Go. First and foremost, where do I, as a student, want to place my webcam? And leave it, Braceland, in one part of the screen. You could have left it right here. You don't always have to go upper left, upper right, lower right, upper left, bottom left. If you want to put it in the middle of the screen, that's okay too. If you want to make it bigger, as what we saw earlier in the semester with a presentation from spring 2020, where it was basically larger, the size of a photograph, that's okay too. So don't be afraid to experiment and then have the slides a little bit smaller or in some type of an inset. But for each of our presenters so far, we can honestly say two things. Improvement regarding the construction of slides and improvement with delivery. Now, with 2 out of 4 presentations, that's a good thing. So for each of our contestants today, start thinking about how you would like to persuade an audience next week. You take informative material and then, using your rhetorical skills, turn it around and make it persuasive, not heavy-handed, not self-righteous, but some type of thoughtful overall perspective. So those are two of the persuasive speeches for day one. The next presenter today is going to be Ariana, and she is going to be examining the topic of depression. As I said, at the end of all of our presentations today, we'll put closed captioning on the screen to check for the quality of complete sentence structure. So this is Ariana looking at depression, and once we begin this, I will make this full screen, and here we go.
Hi, my name is Ariana French, and today I'll be doing my informative speech on depression. What is depression? Depression is a disorder that is common with people in their teens to early 20s. It is a serious medical illness that negatively affects how you may feel, the way you act, and think. It causes feelings of sadness or a loss of interest in activities once enjoyed and a loss of wanting to do everyday tasks you once did. It can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems and can sometimes decrease the ability to function properly doing day-to-day tasks that you would normally do before becoming depressed. Why do people become depressed? Depression can be caused by a stressful life event, illnesses, or certain drugs or medication. Like serious loss, relationship problems, work stress, family crisis, financial problems, or any unwelcome life change. Like an example, 2019, COVID came around, and we had to stay in our house by ourselves, no friends. We were quarantining. We couldn't be around people from like a big group of people for a certain amount of time. So having to be in one environment like an entirety of a year can become very depressing for some people, especially if they're in a toxic household or they're not being able to interact with their friends other than through a phone or a computer or something. There are many types of depression, um, including persistent depressive disorder, a depressing mood that lasts for at least 2 years. A person diagnosed with persistent depressive disorder may have episodes of major depression along with periods of less severe symptoms. So this persistent depressive disorder isn't as bad as depression, but you never know how long depression can last for someone. It just depends on that person. Postpartum depression. Postpartum depression is what many women experience after giving birth. Women with postpartum depression experience full-blown major depression during pregnancy or after delivery. Basically meaning they feel exhausted, they feel like they aren't good enough to have their baby, they feel like they're just doing everything wrong, and many women experience this uh, after, after their pregnancy, and some women even feel like they don't even want their baby for the amount of time they are experiencing postpartum. And a lot of women have experienced postpartum, so that I think that one's pretty like not necessarily normal, but normal for pregnant women. The third one is psychotic depression. It occurs when a person has severe depression plus some form of psychosis, such as having disturbing false fixed beliefs, um, an example, delusions and hallucinations, or hearing and seeing upsetting things that others cannot hear or see. I have been firsthand with a person that has psychotic depression, and it's another one, but yeah, when a person is experiencing this, it's so mentally draining and physically draining for even the family to witness because they aren't they aren't really knowing, especially if they're an older person. Okay. Symptoms of depression can vary from mild to severe and can uh, depression symptoms. Not everyone who is depressed experiences every symptom, and some people experience only a few symptoms while others may experience many. Several persistent symptoms, in addition to low mood, are required for a diagnosis of major depression. Symptoms can vary from mild to severe and can include feeling sad or having a depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure in activities once enjoyed, changes in appetite such as losing weight or gaining weight, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, loss of energy, increased fatigue, an increase in purposeless physical activity like inability to sit still, pacing, twiddling thumbs, or even slowed movements or speech. Feeling worthless or guilty, like when a woman is experiencing postpartum, difficulty thinking, concentrating, or making decisions, and thoughts of death or suicide. Treatment and prevention. Depression is usually treated successfully with professional counseling and or prescribed medication. People with depression can be treated as outpatients or in some cases a person has to be hospitalized. Ways to help from becoming depressed. Trying to be with other people and participating in activities that may make you feel better. Um, when you're depressed, you don't want to feel alone and be alone because the thoughts that you're having is just going to get worse and worse. You can also do mild exercise, going to a movie, a ball game, participating in social or other activities, and letting your friends and family help. Even though depression is very stressful and serious, we should always try and protect ourselves from it. And also try and be open to talk with friends, family, counselors, or even writing down thoughts and feelings can help. Remembering, remember, asking for help isn't always bad because not only does this disorder affect you, but it also affects your family and the people surrounding you too.
Remember, Ariana, wrap up the speech by saying thank you, count silently one, two, three, and then pause for both the persuasive and wild card speeches. Our third presenter of the day, and what you see from each of them, is obvious delivery improvement. And what I appreciate with her is the openness by which she talks about depression, her personal experience with it, because it's not unusual for anyone at any stage in their life, at any age, to have issues with depression or melancholy or whatever you want to call it, whether it is clinical or whether it's just a moment during the day. But think about this final slide. She's got the conclusion and the quote. Even though depression is very stressful and serious, we should always protect ourselves from getting it. Try and be open and talk with friends, family, counselors, or even writing down thoughts and feelings can help. Remember, asking for help isn't always bad because not only does this disorder affect you, but family too. And just from a stylistic perspective, that would be affect with an A. I don't always talk about running spell check with slides, but oftentimes spell check on a word like that, it may get past the goalie. Or depending upon what you have it in, as something being evaluated in American English or British English or anything like that. But when we're looking at the context of what she's saying here, it actually is a sign of mental strength for someone to indicate they've got issues. Remember, college students have been going through for you a once in a lifetime situation for the past 2.5 years with the pandemic. So if things aren't stressful enough as a college student, with finances, lifestyle issues, everything else. Now all of a sudden you have to deal with the pandemic and trying to be safe with your personal circumstances or anything related to your health, whether it be physical or in this case mental. Let's examine her presentation as with everyone else from back to front. Can we tell from our three presenters, Scott and Braceland and Ariana, can we tell improvement in delivery? The more you practice, the more you're looking at the webcam, the smoother you're going to be, depending upon the topic. Yes. Are there issues that you can work on? Yes. Let's go from back to front. Pay attention to her eye contact. She's in the upper right-hand corner. We can probably still, Ariana, tighten this up a little bit, and that's where you look at your classmates and just make certain that you're a little bit tighter toward the screen. And I'm guessing your lighting is probably the best that you can provide under the circumstances. Here, treatment and prevention. She's got everything flush left with a number of bullet points to assist her extemporaneous quality. With depression being treated with professional counseling, prescribed medication, how you can use that treatment and prevention to help. Looking at the camera, being very thoughtful and empathetic during the speech. And then with the symptoms, perfect example of what I'm talking about. She's being expressive, she's looking at the camera, she's utilizing hand gestures. As you're well aware, I don't talk about hand gestures all that much. You just don't want to look like a traffic cop or someone who is bringing in an airplane where your hands distract from your overall presentation. But that really was not the case with her. But look at the intensity by which she's looking at her screen. You can tell she's really into the thought process here. But all of this data you can pick and choose, and her personal experiences again come in so handy to identify the audience with the topic and looking at the symptoms. Ariana, there are some issues on which you're going to have to be more aware, particularly the vocalics. You'll hear uhs and ums during the presentation. I also heard like and yeah. So whenever that comes up in the future, you just think about what you want to say, pause for a nanosecond, like I was indicating before, when Scott will have now instead of a vocalic, and then continue on. But all of this is extremely helpful, especially when you're talking about how individuals may have a few symptoms and others may have many. So it is not the same among everyone. And then we move back. She's still on symptoms, which is not unusual, looking directly at the camera. And here are some of the types. Again, her posture is straight, looking at her graphics, including postpartum depression and psychotic depression. And keeping in mind for students on many college campuses, there are places that you can go if you have any kind of challenges, whether it be depressive disorder or anything else, but those are some of the types. Why? And this is what I like. Quote, can often be caused by a stressful life event, illness, or certain drugs or medication. Bullet point, in example, serious loss, relationship problems, work stress, family crisis, financial problems, or any unwelcome life change. So remember that when you've got your slides and you're practicing, always double check, as we were talking about with the A or E in effect on our final slide, run everything through your word check or through grammar check, depending upon what platform you're using. And even if you have something like Grammarly, it can clean up different types of issues with grammar, spelling, syntax on any of your slides. Looking at the camera, being knowledgeable as a speaker. And we move back towards the first minute. She's still on her first slide. And I'm guessing whenever I scroll back here, what is depression? Again, it's important for everyone to identify with the term. Whenever you're doing anything like that, probably a good idea My cursor is on the right, hers is on the left. Make certain that you move that away and try to consciously keep it away from the slides. And this is where on Loom, I talked about this before. If you want to experiment and have somewhat of an inset, I-N-S-E-T, where your slides aren't necessarily going all the way to the end of the screen and your webcam sticks out just a little bit, so you're not going to have to worry about any kind of text obscuring it, that's certainly acceptable. Look at this for just a minute, not from the standpoint of speech, but from the standpoint of visuals. Everything is flush left. She's got design consistency all the way through with the color, the font style, the font color. She's got the same font size for all of her headlines, same font size for all of the text. And most of the time when you are flush left with these sizes of fonts, either here, upper right, or here for the bottom right, would be appropriate to consider for the webcam. And then there's her title slide, informative speech on depression and her name. I would also appreciate that SPCH 1113, first summer 2020, be on here in the future. For each of our presenters so far, we can see improvement. Is it perfect? No. But not everything is going to be perfect. I'm not going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect, but that's where you watch the videos and try to clean up those particular issues, because as I've said ad nauseum, the more that you practice, the more that you watch yourself, ideally in time, that positive, thoughtful, knowledgeable persona will not just come through for a public speaking course like this, but the way that you carry yourself with that positive style is going to come through in everyday life. That brings us to our fourth presenter of the day. And this is someone new. This is Elizabeth, who had had some connectivity issues, which Elizabeth, you verified, which I appreciate. So we will do your informative speech on ADHD first. What I often do, as you're well aware, for anyone who sends me material by a YouTube channel, oftentimes I will go ahead and make the closed captioning active. I take it off, watch the screen, comes back on. For any of you who have YouTube channels or send something to me on YouTube, just de facto, I always put the closed captioning on, which I did here. And then depending upon, for the speeches that you saw, at least for the first two, their closed captioning was already activated, so I turned it off. But we'll play her informative speech with the closed captioning on, and then we will go back and watch each of these presentations so far intentionally with the audio muted to check on eye contact and also complete sentence structure. Our fourth presentation of the day is Elizabeth and ADHD. We will make it full screen and begin.
Hey everyone, I'm Ellie Burgess, and I chose to do my informative speech over attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or as most of you know it by ADHD. I have struggled with ADHD my whole life, but I didn't get diagnosed until 11th grade, which is uncommon. Most children get diagnosed much earlier than that. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders of childhood, often lasting into adulthood. A person with ADHD has differences in brain development and brain activity that affect attention, the ability to sit still, and self-control. Other symptoms can include a lot of things: aggression, excitability, fidgeting, hyperactivity, irritability, lack of restraint, absent-mindedness, difficulty focusing, forgetfulness, problem paying attention, short attention span, mood swings, depression, and other learning disabilities. The diagnosis and testing. There's no single test to diagnose ADHD. Instead, doctors rely on interviews with parents, relatives, teachers, and other adults, personally watching the child or adult, questionnaires or rating scales that measure the symptoms of ADHD, and psychological tests. So for mine, they interviewed my parents and myself. They listened to what my teachers had to say. They did questionnaires and a lot of rating scales and a lot of psychological tests. It took about 4 hours for my diagnosis. The treatment and coping. You can do behavior therapy, which is something I'm involved in. It helps a lot. Medicine, I take medicine as well. Parent coaching and school support, because your parents and your school have got to be involved and helpful, and they have to help in any way that they can. So, of course, I think the most important part about teaching or about learning about ADHD is to know how to help someone who has it. So, strategies and tips for parents if you one day have a child that has ADHD. Stay involved in their lives. Give medicines safely, because you can overdose on these medicines. You do not want to do that. Give them what you're supposed to give them. And make sure it doesn't cause any side effects. Work with the child's school as much as you can. They need both of you to work together. Parent with purpose and warmth. Connect with others for support and awareness. You can join groups and just connect with other parents that have a child with ADHD. So strategies and tips for teachers of children with ADHD. Since I'm going to be a teacher, I of course wanted to include this. Focus on short-term goals. Long-term goals don't work with children with ADHD. They can only stay in the present moment. So reward them for those short-term goals when they reach them. Play music. Music helps stimulate the brain, and it helps students with ADHD focus better. Allow time to calm down. If they are having a moment, if they're freaking out, allow them their time in a safe space to calm down. And mindfulness activities. Do some sort of breathing exercises, yoga even, just anything to keep them mindful. And that is all for my ADHD. I hope that you learned how to help someone with ADHD or even learned what it is. Thank you.
So that is her first presentation of the term. And as we saw with the previous speech on depression, it is so helpful from the standpoint not only of your experience, but for the benefit of the audience, to let everyone know that if something like this has happened to you, whether it's ADHD or whether it be something like depression, that it is something you can live with, and that openness is going to identify with the audience even more. So let's go ahead and examine her speech from back to front, as we do with everyone. In this case, her eye contact. It's not unusual. You'll see a couple of persuasive speeches and wildcard presentations where they were set up exactly like this. At home, your laptop is turned around, you're showing the graphic. There's one wild card in particular that I'll be showing you in a couple of weeks, which is presented in a noisy house. And the bedroom door is closed and the student is giving a speech, and it's set up literally exactly like that, with the laptop turned around over the student's shoulder, and she's looking exactly in the same direction. So this is something that is very helpful for you to visualize, because if a student decides to record something off of a phone, they have to set up the visual in advance, make sure that they can reach the phone, make certain that at least we can have access to what your slides look like. Oftentimes, in these cases, students are not only going to give me a link to the YouTube channel, but also send me separately what their PowerPoint slides or Google slides are for a presentation. And I'm pretty certain that that's what she did in this particular case. Looking in the back when she's talking about a particular safe space. Moving back, there's her eye contact, how you can connect with others for support. Here, the most important part about teaching or learning about ADHD, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand it. And I've had a number of presentations over the years where we're looking at ADHD from either the standpoint of a student like Elizabeth who has it, or from someone who has a brother or sister who has it, or from the standpoint of a non-traditional student, a parent who is dealing with a student or a child who is in that particular position. And we sneak back. Let me show you oftentimes what I do in these circumstances, particularly on YouTube. That's the end of her presentation. Everyone look at the bottom of the screen. Notice in YouTube, whenever I scroll back, watch her eye contact. Where is she looking? Is she being extemporaneous? Some people might watch this playback and think, gosh, that's really tedious. Not at all. In Monday's class session, remember the one that I infamously said take two because of the connectivity issues on Blackboard, and I had to record the entire class from scratch? One of the things I had indicated then was that video playback is essential to your long-term improvement because, and I'll do it one more time because being a media person, I believe in this. Here is, let's play the last 30 seconds of her speech. Let's just pick it up here, play the last 30 seconds with audio.
Music. Music helps stimulate the brain and it helps students with ADHD focus better. Allow time to calm down. If they are having a moment, if they're freaking out, allow them their time in a safe space to calm down. And mindfulness activities. Do some sort of breathing exercises, yoga even, just anything to keep them mindful. And that is all for my ADHD. I hope that you learned how to help someone with ADHD or even learned what it is. Thank you.
So what she has done is to encapsulate the end of her speech where people who don't necessarily understand about ADHD, like I said, I've had students in this class like her who have ADHD, who have a brother or sister with it, or someone who is a parent or someone who is a teacher who has been dealing with a child, whether it be their own or someone in the classroom who has it. Let's go to the end. Now let's take this. The one thing that you need to work on, Elizabeth, is time management. In the future, please make certain that you get closer to 5 minutes. That's where the timer on Loom comes in handy. If any of you are utilizing YouTube, you need to have a timer somewhere. Even if you've got a timer on your screen in the bottom right-hand corner of your computer screen or off to the side on a cell phone or on some type of digital device, have an idea in the back of your mind where you are in terms of time, because I want all of you to be as close to 5 minutes as possible, because that is the minimum. Bottom right-hand corner, watch her eyes, watch her body movement, back and forth, being extemporaneous, looking at the screen. That's why it's there. And then just continuing to move to the beginning of the speech. Watch your left hand right there. Whenever I see a gesture like that, more than likely, she's talking about herself or something that she can relate to with the open hand toward the audience. Eye contact, meaning that she's practiced, meaning that she's extemporaneous. Are there some issues with grammar, syntax, vocalics? Yes, but those can be easily corrected with issues as time goes on. And there's the beginning of her speech. Again, looking directly at the camera. And I'm guessing she shot this off of her cell phone. So you may go by Ellie, but the first day I'll say, Elizabeth, what you have just seen are a number of different examples of informative speeches. As we progress, the research is going to become more sophisticated, the graphics are going to be neater, but most importantly, that stylistic approach in an online course towards the camera is going to be much more professional, much more smooth. You take it for granted because you're doing it all the time, and then all of a sudden you get to that final presentation, realize, compare that take that we all see in 2 weeks to what you did at the beginning of the semester for either demonstrating or informing. There will be a difference. Now, a lot of it depends upon what the topic is, a lot of it depends upon the practice, everything else. But for the most part, again, I am a positive person. I can see improvement. Are we there yet? No. Will we ever be in our lives? Probably not. But always strive, always learn from your experiences. I do from what I say during class on the videos, and you will too. You'll see something that we never see in a take and cringe. I will hear myself, as I have today, and cringe. But you learn from it. What is making me stumble? What is making you stumble? How can I correct that? How can I be more smooth? How can I, as a student, put something on the screen, whether it is a graphic, a visual, a photo, a video clip? How is any of that going to not only help me as a presenter, but make you this week as an audience learn more from a teaching or lecturing perspective, which is my definition of a quality informative speech? More serious, more research-based. That's important. Let's go back to our presenters in order. First is going to be Scott. We still have the demonstrative speech from Elizabeth, which we'll play, but brief snippets of each presenter in order. With Scott going first, we're going to make this full screen, put on the closed captioning. His audio is already muted. Is he speaking in complete sentences? Let's check out the first 30 to 45 seconds. This is the beginning of his speech. There's two things that I think you should always do. Always speak in a complete sentence structure as much as possible. And when you are, which is my point, evaluating these presentations with the audio down, examine your eye contact also. We can tell, and Scott, you can't do anything about the glare. That just is something that any of us who wear glasses have to realize when we are either looking at a screen or looking at a webcam and where the webcam is located. Sometimes you just can't do anything about it. But he's speaking in complete sentences. Look at the artificial intelligence, pick that up all the way through. Now let's go ahead and pause it right there. So that's what Scott looks like with the audio muted. And as I'd indicated, I do this a lot with the video playback, and you should too. It's so interesting when you play yourself on video with the audio down. How do you perceive yourself as a speaker? There's a reason, hint, hint, wink, wink, that you have the self-evaluation speech critique at the end of the semester. It's okay to be selfish in evaluating yourself in an online course, not to minimize the relevance of looking at everyone else, but how do you come across in your view, from your perspective? We move from Scott with his rock speech to Bracelet. Do the same thing. Put closed captioning on. Mute the audio. Put it in full screen and play. What is she doing for her introduction? Again, Bracelet, find a place and just leave it there. It is distracting when you start to move the webcam around. Find a place that you feel comfortable with and then don't touch it. That is her, I believe, yeah, that is her cursor. And you'll want to move the cursor away from your head when you give the speech. Okay, you don't want it look like it, you don't want the cursor to look like it's stuck in your hair. But her eye contact, the other thing you can tell is she's got some kind of a ring light because you can see her very clearly. Her eye contact is relatively consistent, and you've seen with Scott and in Braceland's case improvement with the eye contact and with the ability to speak in complete sentences. The artificial intelligence does not lie. It's relatively consistent on both Loom and YouTube. Won't be perfect, but it's not bad. And in that case, we are also roughly at about the 1 minute point of the speech. Now let's move on to the third speaker of the day. This is Ariana. And I
Hi,
can't
my name is Ariana
tell.
Rich, and today
I'm not seeing a place where I can put this in closed captioning. If I can find it, this is formatting slightly differently. And I'm not sure if this is, I'm not sure if she did this on Loom or a different platform. But in any event, we'll go ahead and play. I don't see a place here where I can put it in closed captioning. So let's just look at her in the upper right-hand corner. Check out her eye contact. Lighting is improved. The visual is pretty much the same as it was last week. Oftentimes you're dependent upon what lighting you're at in a room, where you're at. Do you have privacy to record where you feel relatively comfortable? In Ariana's case, like the rest of you, there's still going to be a couple of issues with vocalics, but I would much rather have you be able to improve in that category than to read to me. And she's got bullet points, she's got words, she's got phrases. You can tell she's really concentrating here and being very serious and thoughtful in her analysis of the issue. But as I'd indicated right after we played her speech for the first time, those personal experiences really help the audience identify the speaker with the topic, because Ariana's openness to talk about this is so helpful in giving her credibility as a speaker. So that was the third presentation of the day. And whenever hers is being downloaded, that's what I see. And then whenever I open it from the cloud,
Hi, my name is Ariana Rich, and
it
today I'll
opens
be
that
giving my
way
information.
and her audio starts to play. Everything is content to me as a media person. Now let's go back to our only YouTube speech, which is Elizabeth. Audio is muted here as well. For ADHE, looking directly at the camera, we'll make it full screen and play roughly about as much in terms of time as we have with everyone else in this format. Eye contact consistent. Most of you know ADHD. I have struggled with ADHD the whole life, but didn't get diagnosed until 11th grade, which is uncommon, which is true. Usually that's something where you are diagnosed at a relatively early age. As you've seen with Scott, with Braceland, with Ariana, And now I will start to say it with Ellie. Each of them are being relatively consistent with the ability to be extemporaneous. Is everything perfect? No. Are there going to be stumbles? Yes. But the smoothness in time for all of you is going to be more consistent from beginning to end. And we're seeing it in stretches here. As you progress next week to persuasive and the final week with wildcard presentations, you'll notice that the overall improvement for all of you, if you practice and get everything done to the best of your abilities outside of class, are going to be quite striking. As we just saw with Ariana, the personal experiences that she relates here are very, very helpful. She comes across, as all of you do, as likable, and we can't minimize the importance of likability, as thoughtful, as well-researched, and even though her graphics are a little bit blurry here, that's okay. Ellie, don't worry about it. It's not a problem whatsoever. But the fact that you are being very open and honest in talking about this, and that was the hand gesture I talked about before, really makes people empathize with you, understand the situation, or at least be aware of it from a perspective with which they may not identify with. We'll go ahead and pause and come back to me for just a moment. We are going to return to Ellie because she had some issues with interactivity, as I told you at the beginning of today's class period. And I am going to, for the record, show her demonstrative speech. She is recording from a slightly different location, but doing it from YouTube in the same fashion. As I told you a few minutes ago, what I often do with YouTube speeches, and you've seen me for demonstrative and informative examples from semester and years gone by, do this, is to put closed captioning on the screen almost as a de facto measure for any type of YouTube channel related speeches. So here we've got her demonstrative speech on clogging. So in addition to her watching it, the second view will be for all of you right now.
Hi everyone, I am Ellie Burgess. I have been a dancer for 15 years. I've been a teacher since I was 13. So today I chose to do my demonstration speech over how to clog. What is clogging? According to the internet, clogging is a type of dance practiced in the United States in which the dancer's footwear is used to percussively by striking the heel and the toe against the floor to create different rhythms. Clogging shoes have two metal pieces on the heel and on the toe. And the second metal piece is loose so that when you shake it, it makes this noise, so it adds an extra rhythm. I have clogged for 11 years, and so I'm ready to teach you how to clog today. If you want to stand up with me, you can. There are 3 basic clogging steps that I think are the most important to know. The first is called a basic. Their second is called a fancy double, and the third is called a triple. A basic, I'll show you right now. In clogging, you always start with your left foot. Now it might be flipped for you, but it's your left foot that you start with. So a basic is when you brush your toe up, brush it back, step. That is called double step. Then with the right foot, you step back and step front. That's called a rock step. So let's try that together. Double step, rock step. And then you can do the other foot. Double step, rock step. That is a basic. That's our first one. I have a video of me doing it here. Now next, once you know a basic, you can do almost any clogging step. Once you know that double and the rock step, you do almost anything. Our next is called a fancy double because you do 2 doubles and 2 rock steps. So it's a fancy double. So you, starting with your left foot, brush up, brush back, step, now you're right. Brush up, brush back, step, and then with your left foot, do 2 rock steps. Rock, step, rock, step. So again, brush up, brush back, step, brush up, brush back, step, rock, step, rock, step. Here's a video a little faster. Rock, step, rock, step. Now, our next is a triple because you do 3 double steps and 1 rock step. So as always, starting with your left foot, you brush up, brush back, step. Brush up, brush back, step. Brush up, brush back, step, and then rock, step. So a little faster, starting with your left foot. Double step, double step, double step, rock, step. And then you can do the other foot. Double step, double step, double step, rock, step. Here's a video of me doing it up close. So, clogging is my favorite style of dance, so I had a lot of fun being able to teach this to you guys. I hope that you stood up and did it with me because it's really fun to learn. And now that you know these 3 steps, you know the basics of clogging. Thank you.
And that's the end of her presentation. What a lot of you do, and you saw this during the run-up to the demonstrative speeches last week, so many examples from the past few years where video is incorporated into your slides, and we'll continue to see that over the next 2 weeks for persuading and for the wild cards. But in Ellie's case, having personal experience with clogging is, as you saw with the ADHD informative speech, topics that give her credibility as a speaker because she can identify with them. And her delivery was still loud enough where even standing in the back of the room, the closed captioning is picking up what she was saying. Very expressive, likable persona all the way through, but especially just getting up and dancing was very helpful because a lot of people may not necessarily know what clogging is. Let's look at bits and pieces, as we always do, from back to front, being expressive, looking in the direction of the camera, and then using different types of video, getting up to look at the, I believe it was rock step. Same thing there. And the closed captioning is following her back, and there's the rock step. Here's the video a little faster. Let's go ahead and play it.
Rock, step, rock, step.
Rock, step, drop, step. And then we have brush up first strap. If that's correct, it might be first step. And then here, part of the process of the dancing. Back to the camera, clogging step, back up. Now remember, a demonstrative speech is showing the process from beginning to end. So doing it like that is very helpful. If we were in a face-to-face classroom, she would be basically doing the same type of thing. And holding up the shoe, don't ever minimize the importance of something like that, because if you're clogging, obviously, you can see that the heel is going to be different than a normal heel. And there's the beginning of her presentation, looking at the camera. Where she's been a dancer, make sure we get years on here.
15 years.
15 years. As we did with her ADHD speech, here's the end. Look at the bottom of the screen. Look at the movement from back to front. Look at the bottom of the screen. Her speech backwards in slow motion. Checking out her eye contact. The demonstration of the clogging. This is the type of thing, I'll leave it there for the time being because I have to reconfigure my cursor. Now, these are the types of things, depending upon the speech topic, depending upon the subject matter, that all of you should be doing. It may feel a bit tedious, but that self-evaluation is huge in trying to determine, let's go ahead and mute this now, and just play this as we have with everyone else, some of this in real time with the audio down. How does the audience perceive you? How do you want the audience to perceive you? How are the graphics, the text, stimulating and maintaining the extemporaneous style of your speech? How is the text? How is the visual approach, including that? Making your topic interesting. And also, of course, you can see the top of the shoe for a dance is the same, the top and the bottom. Now let's watch her. Continue to watch this in real time with the audio down because it shows she knows the subject matter. Sneaking a peek, reminding her of what's on the next slide, which is going to be a transition, I believe, into clogging. So we'll play this with the audio down until she gets up and starts to dance. If we're in a classroom, she would be doing the same thing. And this is where projection comes into play, projecting your voice. Now let's unmute.
Your left foot. Now it might be flipped for you, but it's your left foot that you start with. So a basic is when you brush your toe up, brush it back, step. That is called double step. Then with your right foot, you step back and step front. That's called a rock step. So let's try that together. Double step, rock step. And then you can do the other foot. Double step, rock step. That is a basic. That's our first one.
So I wanted to play that in real time because depending upon what your subject matter is, and there's the video being played, depending upon what your subject matter is, that playback is going to be so essential in trying to figure out, here's what I want to do for an interactive video that I just placed. Where am I going to structure that? Where am I going to put it on the slide? How can I place that into a main or a supporting point that is going to help the audience visualize and identify with the relevance of clogging? So whenever we're looking at a presentation that in this case is roughly about 5 minutes, and ironically her demonstrative speech was longer than the informative speech, always remember that whether it is clogging for demonstrative or her demonstrative transitioning into informative subject matter, which is ADHD, always have in the back of your mind, can I make this material interesting, thoughtful, relevant to the audience? And I think she does a good job. So we'll pause it right there where she is looking at the audience. What we had today, as we come back to me, were some really interesting examples of primarily informative, but also one leftover demonstrative topic. And you can also obviously infer from my media background that playing everything back and being critical in a positive way of yourself really is going to be of invaluable service as time goes on in your personal or academic lives. and certainly from a professional standpoint. Let me show you my email. I have a couple of items to put up on the screen before we leave for the day. But I'm going to put my email up on the screen first, because as of right now, before we come to it, I'm going to check my spam and then go back to SPCH 1113 file. So as of right now, this is what everyone has sent to me for the class. Starting with Ellie at the bottom, Scott, Ariana, and then you see my name, but there were a few of you, including Bracelin and I believe someone else, who sent me materials to my SAU email address. And while you're looking at that on the screen, I'm going to check my SAU email one more time, and I don't see anything else there. Within this, from some of you, this is what Scott's email looks like, for instance, whenever he sends something to me. But don't worry, and by the way, Scott, don't worry about the length. But I will show this kind of stuff during class because these are elements that everyone can identify with. So that was something from Scott. This is an email that was sent to me during class. So let's get back to 1113. But this is what I'm going to see whenever you send material to me, but I also have to check spam to ensure that the items are playable for class purposes. Last interactivity of the day is going to return to Blackboard. The student preview mode. This is my official roster. Day 2, coming up tomorrow. Make certain that I get your material by class time, and even during class time, I will always check my SAU and Yahoo accounts to ensure that whatever you send me is going to be played and examined during class. So that's the setup for the rest of the week. And as I always say, keep me appraised regularly so I may be of assistance during your respective speech preparation processes. Thanks. As we conclude Informative Speech Day 1, it's nice to see the improvement that all of you are making in those 3 categories that you're well aware of now that I've talked about so many times from the informal checklist, the speech evaluation form. Content, delivery, visuals. Is everything going to be perfect? No. Some of the notes that I've written down for students today include gonna, like, yeah, personal experience, more comfortable, more fluent, now, smooth. Something that I use as a jumping off point whenever we are evaluating students, but I use this in a positive way. And whenever I say positive, constructive criticism, that includes me. There will be some days that no matter how likable you are, how knowledgeable you are, how thoughtful you are, no matter what the category is, you are. You can't get your teeth out of the way of your tongue, and there will be a couple of stumbles. So I might listen to myself in real time, and not everything is going to be smooth. And while I may cringe, whenever I go back, watch and listen to this video, I, as a professor, can learn from it. What can I do in the future to maintain a smoother delivery? That's where the video is a positive, not a negative. Because once you leave this class in your academic or personal or professional lives, all of these things are going to come to fruition. So by the way you carry yourself, by the way you talk, you're going to know what you look like, what you sound like, and that overall speaking style from a visual perspective, from a verbal perspective, is going to stand you in good stead. That's why the self-evaluation speech critique is intentionally designed to make you think about your overall improvement. As a researcher, a writer, putting your graphics together visually in terms of design consistency and aesthetic appeal, and as a public speaker. So we're doing some nice things. We will resume with day 2 of informative speeches tomorrow, but in the meantime, please make certain that you send me what you believe is the best available take by class time of the presentation that you feel best represents your abilities as a speaker. The grades are pretty good so far, so let's keep that up. It's nice to see your improvement. 2 weeks and 1 day to go. Let's keep it up. As for SPCH 1113, Introduction to Public Speaking for the first summer session of 2022, that concludes the recording session for today.